All right, we are now recording. So the other thing I want to point out is I have two screens on my computer. This one that I'm looking at now, where all of you are, and then I have another one over here. So if you see my head turning to my left, um, it's because I'm looking at my screen. It's where I tend to do my screen shares. So that's just FYI if you're like, am I supposed to be looking at something or what is Kate looking at? So I'm going to, so Tony, similar to our last workshop, I'm going to share my slides on my screen. And if anybody has reactions or needs my attention, just let me know. Okay, so let me hear this. Okay, and Tony, are you able to see the slide? Is everybody able to see the slides?
Yes, we're looking good.
Perfect. Well, welcome to class, everybody. You have just entered the next 2 hours of your life learning about documenting your art, preparing for online sales. This is a foundational online workshop about managing your work. So, part of our welcome is I always like to say, why are we here? Um, Reasons why I wanted to teach this workshop as a fellow artist and someone who owns their own business, selling their own artwork. I've found that, not having good documentation can lead to some of these bullet points, such as missed opportunities for sales, hours wasted on resizing your images of your artwork for different platforms, like so on social media or your website or for print. Um, Lost tracking of your inventory. So not having like the most detailed descriptions of your artwork, which can also lead to long-term legacy loss, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, who am I? Um, Interesting enough, I forgot to put my name on this, but I'm Kate Thornhill. My full-time day job is I am a librarian, a digital research librarian at the University of Oregon. I also like to disclose that I am not a lawyer. I talk a lot about copyright and a lot of advocacy around intellectual property rights. But I'm not a lawyer. I give a lot of advice around access and publishing and how to navigate the internet. But I do specialize in online publishing, just access to information in general, and communication technologies. So, how to catalog, how to build an archive. I went to graduate school as an archivist, and bringing that both into the physical and to the digital realms. And I'm also a ceramic artist. I have a BA in art and a BFA in art and a BA in art history. I'm originally from Massachusetts, and I'm a ceramic artist. And if folks are interested in learning more about Eugene and Lane County in general ceramics, I'm also the president of Local Clay, our local professional potters association. And then finally, I'm an art educator at Maud Kearns. I teach all the kids ceramics classes. So let's talk about workshop structure before we get into the content. So how's this workshop going to operate? How's it going to run? So what we're going to be learning today is how do we create a professional documentation system that makes your artwork easy to catalog, find, and potentially to sell. Next is how do we build efficient tracking systems that prevent inventory mistakes and streamlining your art business? And then finally, like learning some strategies around image management, such as like proper sizing, naming, and organizational tactics. So our workshop is going to be 2 hours long. I do have breaks built in, and I like to kind of like survey everybody's vibe on you want a break because screen fatigue is real. I highly encourage if you got animals, babies, you're eating dinner, you're drinking, etc., etc. Take care of yourself first. Step away from the workshop. We are recording, so if you need to revisit anything later, 2 thumbs up. So obviously we are using Zoom for this workshop. If you find that you're running into any challenges using Zoom during this workshop, Tony is here from Marg Kearns, and they're going to be our technical assistants during the class. So you're welcome to engage Tony, either through the chat or raising your hand. They will be here to help you out. So let's explore Zoom before we continue. So I want to call to attention a critical component to Zoom. It's called the control bar. There's an image of it on your screen. It's supposed to be located on the bottom of your screen. Sometimes it gets moved around. Sometimes it's right now, for example, it's at the top of my screen instead of at the bottom. But this control panel gives you all those like awesome bells and whistles for how to interact and engage and control your Zoom. Um, Now we're gonna do a little bit of practice. So let's practice how to use Zoom, the audio and video. So this is totally optional. You don't have to engage in this if you don't want to, but I'd love for you to look at your control bar and either for the audio or for the video, turn it on, turn it off. Try it out. And then Tony, when you feel like everybody's tried it out, give me a go ahead.
Yes, looks like everybody's got the hang of that one.
Perfect. All right, let's move forward. Zoom also has closed captioning available. I personally love having closed captions on when I am on Zoom and I am learning, mainly because I'm somebody who likes to have subtitles on and be able to read while I listen to somebody speak. So if you're interested in having closed captions on, down in your control bar, there should be an icon that looks like this one called show captions, and you'll be able to turn on or off closed captions during this workshop. So if you're interested in having those on, highly encourage, do that now. Okay. The next interaction with Zoom are reactions. And I've seen that some folks already know how to use reactions, which is great. But in your control bar, there is an icon with a heart that says react. As a teacher, I like knowing all my students know how to use this feature on Zoom because it is a way that I am able to, one, read the room and get a temperature check, and also be able to effectively like see who's asking questions and be able to call on them to ask questions or engage in conversation. So what I would like everybody to do is click on that react button and give a thumbs up emoji. I want everybody to give me a thumbs up emoji. And this thumbs up emoji, it will automatically disappear after a few seconds from you clicking on it. Great, I'm seeing folks giving that thumbs up. Beautiful. Okay, the next thing I want all of you to do is in that React control space, I want you to click the raise hand option. So everybody raise your hand. And we've got raised to awesome. Now, something about the raised hand feature. You have to manually turn it off instead of waiting for it to turn, like to automatically turn off. So everybody put your hands down now. Beautiful. And if you want to try out another reaction, I like to use the celebration one of clap. That's an automate. Click on clap, and then that one automatically will go away. So if you want to try out another emoji, go for it. Okay. And then finally, polls. I do have one poll in this class. I think I have one poll in this class, but polling is another interaction that I like to use primarily for assessing student learning and understanding when I'm teaching new concepts. So I'm going to release a poll to all of you, and I want you to answer that poll. It's like a little survey. So I'm gonna, when I release this poll, your job is gonna be to respond to it. And so for responding to this poll, you're going to select your answer. And typically these are multiple choice. And then you're going to send your response. So I'm going to release a poll. Okay. Poll has launched. Please respond to that poll. The question is, I'm actually going to go to the next slide. Here's our question and the poll. Let's try this poll. What's your biggest art documentation challenge? What is your biggest art documentation challenge? Okay, so we got 7 of 11 people who have responded. I'm gonna close. Awesome. All right, we're good. Okay, so now I'm gonna end this poll and I'm gonna share the results with all of you. So now you can see the results. So we're kind of all over the place, which is really cool. But I would say like 30% of folks said managing different image sizes for various platforms. So folks are like, what's a platform? Like Facebook or Instagram or your website or any other like online like publishing app or website tool that you use. So we're gonna be talking about all of these concepts in today's class. So I'm going to stop. So thanks for everybody for participating in that poll. All right, let's move on. So the final thing related to Zoom are these like social technology communication challenges that we typically run into when we're in class on Zoom. The first is the video freeze. You may have been on Zoom and somebody's talking and then all of a sudden their screen is frozen, but yours is not. A way to stop that from happening to yourself or to other people is by turning your video and audio off when you're not using it. This helps to speed up people's internet connections or their bandwidth. A second is speaking over each other. Having audio off by default is, in my eyes, always the two thumbs up. Only turning it on when you need to speak. I'm somebody that loves to chit chat. I'm very extroverted. I'm also from Massachusetts. So when in a conversation, speaking over each other is just like a way of communication that I've just been culturally conditioned to. So having this feature of turning audio on and off has been really beneficial for me with my communications. And then second is feeling screen fatigue. That's real. I have a job where I'm at a computer all the time. Wish it wasn't that way, but I have to take frequent breaks because I'm always looking at my computer. So stepping away from your computer is highly, highly recommended if you feel yourself getting tired. It's okay to take a break. All right. So that's enough about Zoom. Now more about the workshop. So when we're talking about art documentation, especially in the digital realm, because that is the focus of this, the digital realm is the focus here. I like to disclose what this workshop is not covering and what this workshop is covering. So on your screens, on my slide, we're not going to be learning in this class how to manage buyer information. We're not going to be learning how to configure like specific websites to sell artwork online. We're not going to be talking about how to price artwork. Um, we're not going to be going super hardcore in depth about intellectual property rights. So like you owning your artwork versus somebody else owning it, or you using somebody's artwork to influence your own artwork. That was covered in our copyright workshop. And then how we photograph our artwork, that's not covered in this workshop. Specific computer programs and showing you how to use them, we don't have enough time. But we're definitely going to mention them and I will talk about them too. And then finally, this workshop really is going to be focusing on still images. So, like photographs of your artwork. I won't be going into super depth about video or streaming media. I know a lot about it and I can help to answer questions around it, but really, this workshop is framed around images. And so, what does this workshop cover? It's truly a framework to help you get going with organizing and documenting your artwork digitally. So that is regardless if it's a painting or a digital photograph. I am an archivist, so everything that I share with you in this workshop is framed from an archives perspective by somebody who is a practicing artist that has their own business. And then finally, um, talking about backups to your digital artwork, and then also the importance of copyright. So, part one, why is digital documentation of artwork important? Why does it matter? So, here's 5 points. Um, what is documentation of art in the digital? Um, we've got high quality images are important. Complete descriptions of your artwork, having consistent file names for your digital versions or your digital art, knowing about copyright and also usage rights, use information about your artwork, and then finally, digital storage and backups. I also should say that like the general organization of all of this too, like it matters because you need to be able to find your work. So with these like 5 areas, um, it leads to a foundation in meeting some critical goals in a documentation in your process. Of one, like documentation is meant for you to be able to find your work, support sales and marketing of your work, supporting your professional opportunities, and also long-term career development. Like, wouldn't it be really cool if I still had all of the artwork I made when I was in my early 20s? That'd be really great because then I could actually see longitudinally, like, the history of my art practice and how it's shaped and how it's formed. Professional opportunities, as an example, would be cool. There's a call for entry and I want to exhibit my work. Wouldn't it be great if I had all my most important work that I want to submit to a show documented and it streamlined my submission process? An example for making sales and marketing. Wouldn't it be great if I had a inventory list or a catalog of my artwork that I want to sell and I had pricing for it? And then in general, being able to find your work. Like, wouldn't it be great if you just knew where on your computer to go and everything was beautifully arranged and organized and you were like, "Yes, 2003, what did I make then?" So being able to find your work without documentation, these are some of the hurdles that you could encounter. Um, looking for that big blue piece. It could be anywhere among the dozens of storage boxes or digital file folders that you've set up. Without documentation, you could get messages from potential clients, potential buyers. Um, and you're looking for stuff, and it could slow down that process of working with them. But with documentation, you can be able to find and locate your artwork, potentially in seconds, by knowing where to find, the title, the date, or, some more robust descriptions. With documentation, you're able to track your work effectively of where is it stored, where has it been exhibited, and respond to inquiries with confidence where it's like, "Yeah, I can find it. I can find this information really quick and get back to somebody." Um, I've talked a little bit about marketing and sales. I'm gonna push us through a little bit, because I want to learn more about, about all of you. And tell me more about your documentation issues or challenges, like specifically what kind of like drives you crazy about not having a documentation system, or what roadblocks do you encounter? So I'm going to stop my share, and this can also be an opportunity to ask questions as well if you're just like, I'm not sure what my challenges are. So if you want to, this is optional. If you want to share some of your challenges with documentation, please raise your hand or you can share it in the chat. And this is meant to be a conversation first before we move on. Great. I've got a question in the chat from Adriana. How to organize files and what type of file sizes. Great. I have a whole section on organizing files and the type of file sizes for different platforms and how they meet various standards for like original versions versus derivatives that you would make to publish online. But yeah, that's one of my. How many other folks? Give me some thumbs up if you run into that challenge as well. Let's find commonality amongst all of us. Give me a thumbs up if you run into that issue frequently. Yep, we're all not alone in this. Okay, the second one we've got is having to look through about 1,000 photos to find a specific art photo and how to store outside of the iPad. Yeah. So one of the biggest advices that I always bestow on anybody is, and I actually just had this conversation with my spouse because he's like having to back up his iPhone and download a bunch of pictures. I highly recommend building in every 2 to 3 months, going through the content on anywhere you take photographs. This is for your artwork and then just anywhere in life, right? So thinking about this as your personal like review of, because I take pictures on my phone for my artwork. I do it on my phone. In my practices, every 2 to 3 months, I download everything into a central place. So that's one advice that I typically give people is have a regular schedule where you are going and looking at all of that content, all that data that is on your phone, those pictures, the videos you've taken. Um, and so, yeah, I struggle big time with that too, but that's just step one. Download stuff off of your device and have a central place to store it. Let me check out what else we got in the chat. Finding pieces and remembering what I named them. Yeah. And advice I give on that for folks is have a spreadsheet or somewhere where you're writing down your file names and a title of a piece. So and I'll talk about the relationship between those two things when we talk about artwork descriptions or creating your own catalog. Sizing of sculptures, locating logistical storage platforms. Yep, I'm gonna recommend some storage platforms as well as like how to think about backing up your stuff using in a protocol that we call lots of copies keep stuff safe. A couple of my challenges is carving out time to take pictures and finding the words to describe my work, then determining if a piece even deserves the effort. Yeah, I feel you. I feel you. I feel you, Brian. Do you have any tips for picking what pieces are worth it, or do you strive to archive everything? I don't archive everything. That shocks a lot of people. But when we live in such a digital age, you are the curator of your personal data, your personal digital captures, right? So no, I'll take like 5 pictures of the same pot, like just to get that right photograph. But I don't keep all 5 of them. I might have a photo shoot where I'm photographing my 3D artwork, my pot. Um, and I will do a front shot and then side shots or just different angled or detailed shots. And I'll take like 3 or 4 photos from each angle. And then when I'm doing my editorial review, I choose 1 or 2 pictures max from each angle. And that will actually like limit down how much photography I have to go through later. So it's thinking strategically and also practically about like, do I really want to go through 500 photographs? Um, how do I make this easier for myself? Um, Another advice I have about like finding time to take photographs. I struggle with that as well. I have a whole backlog of work that I need to take pictures of. And really, I think it's like get it on your calendar and get it on your calendar, find the right weather, find the right lighting, and just do it. But chunk out not just time to take the photographs, but time to do what we call post production, editing, and cataloging and data management. It's a lot of like what I like to call invisible labor. But trust me when I say if you front load all of this documentation work in the beginning, you're going to be kissing your past self and hugging your past self. Okay. I have trouble determining appropriate prices. Yeah, so we're not going to talk about how to figure out pricing in this workshop. If you want to stay behind later and talk about like how I determine pricing, I'm more than happy to chat about that, but that's not really within scope of this workshop. And then everything evolving around photographing. Yep. So we're not going to specifically talk about how to photograph, but we will be talking about cool. You got pictures. What to do with them now? Any other questions before we continue? This is great. And this is also great to hear about like what your concerns are because it potentially gives us some more information about what future workshops to be offering folks. Okay, let me share my screen and we're going to continue. So, part two of the slides is let's talk about high quality images and image sizing needs. Because we can't really get anywhere with documentation until we've got like a picture in our computer, right? All right, let's define what are high quality images. So, on your screen, what I'm sharing with you is low and high res version of the Mona Lisa. That was just for illustrative purposes. Like this actually is not a high res image or an original image, obviously. But the reason why I've shared this two versions of the Mona Lisa is because you want your digital files to accurately represent your artwork with sufficient detail and clarity. So you're going to hear me throughout the workshop sometimes use the word original to describe a high quality image. Okay, so I might say high quality image, I might say original. But what I'm talking about is that copy that is like the crispest, most amazing version that is archival friendly. So, what's up with like the Mona Lisa on the left? And why is it abstracted? Why are there all these boxes? So what makes up a digital image, just as this is regardless if it's low quality, high quality, regardless of what its quality is, every digital image is made up out of a pixel. Pixels are literally a bunch of squares that make up a rendering, of a visual version of your artwork in a digital form. So it's like the what I like to tell a lot of my students when I talk about this, it's like we're seeing the matrix, like these squares all together. So if you only have a if there are less squares, less pixels, it's lower quality. Could be lower quality. If there's more pixels, you have more density of pixels, it's more information. It's a higher quality. You're going to get more detail. There might be more color. But what I want to get the point across with high quality images, all of these little all these little pixels, you got to have a lot of them to have high quality. So, why is high quality important to all of us? First, Professional representation. When we have call for proposals, call for entries, I should say, galleries usually want like high quality images, right? For those submissions. If you're applying for grants. I know Lane County Arts Council, when they have their grants every end of spring, beginning of summer, they ask for you to submit images of your artwork. Now, submitting low quality versus high quality, if you got just submit something with a lot with pixels and it's kind of fuzzy and there's no detail, that could jeopardize your potential opportunity of getting grant funding for your art. Um, Also, if you're like submitting for a show and your artwork is getting judged, like these folks who are in charge of these opportunities, they want high quality. And so professional representation is important to us. Next we have is accurate reproduction. So this high quality, um, another word that is used for high quality is high resolution. So more pixels, higher quality, higher resolution. So high res version, low res version. Those two terms are thrown out a lot in the art world when we're talking about the digital images. So we do want accurate representation of our work. So color, textures, the detail, the essence of like the materiality of your work. This is the benefit of a high quality image. And then thinking about just like the quality of the files. Like if we have an original, like a high resolution original, that means we can make lower quality copies or lower resolution copies that can be more appropriate for sharing on Facebook, for sharing on Instagram. You can create derivatives from high quality images. And then finally, there's the archival value, right? These original high quality images also can meet archival standards. They serve as permanent records of your work that may be sold, and that may be sold that maybe you don't have anymore because you've gifted it or given it away, or you just purely want to have it so you can create lower versions of it. So let's talk about image specifications. And so this is what I'm like when I hear what's up with photography and the evolving world of photography. um I think about this in terms of image specifications, like a TIFF versus a JPEG. What is PPI? What is DPI? What are all these jargony technological terms that relate to digital images? So a TIFF and a JPEG, a TIFF and a JPEG are file types. So if you're like, well, Kate, which one is the most appropriate for a high quality image? I would say always go for the TIFF, but if you can only do a JPEG, that's okay. But in archives land, the 300 pixels per inch, with the actual dimensions of your artwork. So let's say you have an 11 by 14 painting and you photographed it. We're going to want to have 300 PPI or pixels per inch. We're also going to want accurate color representation that has appropriate white balance. Now, for folks that are like, what is this lady talking about? These are features that you're able to control in Photoshop or in Lightroom or in other image editing softwares. And there are so many tutorials online where you can learn how to make sense of like this tech landscape related to image management I made an online resource guide. I'm going to share it with y'all later, but I have link outs to like some tutorials for how to do resizing and what are the standards that you should be following. So fear not if you're like, I'm going to have to learn more about this later. Don't worry about it. I got you. Next is like sharp focus throughout. Proper exposure, no blown out highlights or loss of shadows. This red, green, blue color space that is set for screens in your cameras, in your computer programs. These are all elements of what make up a high quality image. So let's continue with image specifications, social media and websites. And we're talking about specifically publishing artwork online. And this requires making derivatives or lower versions of your original image. So the first is when we're talking about originals, I've mentioned like here's the standard. The archival standard is 300 pixels per inch, and the file types, which are also called extension types, TIFF or JPEG. If you're going to be making derivatives between 72 and 150 pixels per inch, and your file type is going to be JPEG. So let's talk social media now, specific platforms. I focus on Instagram and Facebook, but mainly Instagram because that's where a lot of the artist community and just visual material community lives on the internet. So for Instagram, for square or portrait, the dimensions are here. They're always going to be a JPEG. These dimensions won't change unless Instagram is like, nope, it's no longer like 1080 by 1080. And this is the dimension of your image. The dimension. So the actual like length and width, the height and width. If you're like, well, Kate, what's the pixels per inch? Again, it's going to be between 72 and 150 ppi, pixels per inch. For Facebook, we've got 1200 by 300 by 630 pixels. Again, these are the dimensions that you're going to resize your high quality or original image down to. And there's two sizes listed for Facebook and it like similar to Instagram. So for timeline images, it's 1200 by 630. And then for albums, the max width or height is going to be 2048. And then there's our actual artist websites. This is really truly going to depend, like what dimensions, what size you make your image. When you downsize it from your original, we're making a derivative, remember. This really is going to depend on the platform you're using. So Squarespace, Wix, Square, WordPress, those are all very, very common websites that artists use to have portfolio websites or to sell their work online. I should have put Etsy on here. Space out on my bad. But again, like I recommend, even though like the dimensions are going to depend on the platform, where we've got pixels per inch, 72 to 150 pixels per inch. Let's now talk about computer programs for image editing. There's a variety of free and paid computer programs. We also call them apps. Free and paid computer programs for image editing. The first I'll focus on what's available for free that you don't have to pay for. My favorite to use, and it can be used on a Mac or a or Windows, is called GIMP. So GIMP is great. Literally, it's got what you need for resizing and for working with high quality images. At the University of Oregon, where I'm doing my digital archive work, like I use this with any of my employees that don't have access to, say, Adobe products. And then the next suggestion I make for folks is this is actually like a new app that I learned about recently. It's web-based. It's you don't have to download it onto your computer. You can just access it through your internet browser, like Chrome or Safari or other browsers that you might have installed on your computer, like Edge. So it's called Photopea. And again, it runs in your internet browser. And then let's talk about paid or free-ish. Free-ish. So the gold industry standard for work, like a software for working with images, is going to be these Adobe products, right? So Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Lightroom. That's what I use in my professional setting, and then also on my own personal computer away from working at UO. And then we also have an app that is browser based called Canva. Canva's pretty awesome if you very, very quickly want to take a high resolution image and have a computer automatically format it to be ready for Facebook or for Instagram or for Etsy. It's pretty nifty. I've used it when having to build branding kits for my art business. And so I recommend it's free-ish. You can pay a subscription to use it, but they also have a lot of free features available. I'm gonna pause. I'm gonna stop my screen share. Questions, and feel free to use the chat, or you can raise your hand.
How about raw files instead of JPEG or TIFF? How does that compare?
I love that you brought up the raw file format. So raw, when you have a DSLR camera, so that's like one of those pro cameras, that single lens reflex, digital single lens reflex camera. Um, the best practice for um, capturing images with that style of camera is to format it to be raw. Raw is um, it's a proprietary version of a TIFF. So the recommendation that I always give folks is when you're photographing, and you should be capturing in a raw format, is capture it in raw, and then when you bring it over to your computer, because you're want to do your high quality, you want to keep working in high quality images and then be able to make derivatives later, I recommend converting raw to TIFF, because raw can only be opened with certain photo editing softwares. TIFFs is a universal high resolution, like keeps all of your like the maximum amount of data that is needed to create this beautiful high quality image. TIFF is an open version instead of a version that is controlled by companies. So that's what I mean by proprietary versus an open format. So that's been I was trained on that process I'm a trained for digital photographer. That's the process that I use is capture in raw, convert to TIFF, and then you think of your raw as like your production copy, and then your TIFF version as your final archival copy that you have edited already. So you should be editing in the raw, and then once you're done editing in the raw, you convert it into a TIFF, and the TIFF is what you use to make derivatives. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, let's see. Go over some different file formats. Alan, is there additional file formats that you would like me to talk about other than TIFFs and JPEGs? So I can talk about video and audio too. I work in that as well. Well, if folks are curious about video and audio, let me know in the chat and I can like talk about those as well. So Adriana, you asked, I'm curious about if you have any general tips for photos on portfolio sites that switch from mobile to desktop. Lily's curious about, yes, the HEIC files that are transferred from phone to computer. Are they still good quality? Can they be transformed into TIFFs? Okay. I feel you on this. So with iPhones, so I have my iPhone set to whenever I take a picture, I do have it set to that file format, the HEIC file. That is the Apple version of a RAW file format. So yeah, you can actually go on your phone if you didn't want to capture in that file format. Remember, that's like the high res version. Um, you can set your phone to capture in high res JPEG. So, but that's an aside. But yeah, you can go and convert as long as you have photo editing software that can open that HEIC file format. Um, convert it to a TIFF. And then you'll be able to open it in like you definitely will be able to open it in GIMP for sure. Okay, any other questions related to image files and sizing? What about Cloud Convert? That's a website, right? For converting files, right, Alan? I haven't used it in a really long time, but I am pretty sure that that website has a file upload limit. And I also caution folks whenever you are uploading any kind of digital files to a freely available software, just be cognizant that you're uploading your data to someone's server and they now have access to it. So you might want to go in like wherever you're uploading your pictures to convert from one file format to another. Just something to be aware of who you're giving your data to. Any other questions before we continue? Okay. Let's keep going. Okay, we'll do part 3 and then I'm going to ask all y'all if you want a break. So, part 3, consistent file naming and folder organization. This is actually my favorite part to talk about as an archivist. All right. So how do we build effective file? We have our beautiful image, our high res, high quality, original image. How do we build effective file names? So why do file names matter? Now, give me give me a yes in the chat. Give me just like some reaction in general of how many of you have been really frustrated by having digital files on your computer that just have a bunch of numbers and random letters as the file name and you have no clue what it's about? That's my biggest pet peeve whenever I download anything off of my phone. And I'm just like, what? So, yeah, I love the dead icon. Me too. So why do file names matter? 1, searchability. This is being able to find your files once they open. 2, organization. So file names can lead to grouping related works together automatically. 3, professionalism. I'm sure many of us on this call have seen call for entries and they're like, please name your files this way, right? So it's using a standard for naming your digital files. 4, I call it preservation, but long term, you're able to see your file names as being identifiable, especially when they're living all like in different folders, right? You have a standard file name for your work. You're able to make sense of it. The other way I frame this one is like, hey, imagine if you ever have someone helping you or you're gifting all of your digital images to an archive, like, I don't know, like the University of Oregon. Wouldn't it be really nice if when you hand over that archive to an archivist like me, who knows nothing about your work, or some about your work, but you give me that digital version of your stuff, I could probably make sense of your work in a better way if your file naming is more descriptive. I might be able to figure it out. But if it's just a bunch of random numbers and random letters and there's no patterning for me to be able to know what it's about, ugh. And then also it's efficient. It helps with efficiency. This is streamlining your workflow and also ability to collaborate with others. So what are the core elements for file naming your artwork? First, so this is my recommendation. It's my recommendation as an archivist and it's worked for me. But I like to say whatever you're going to use as your file naming standard or those core elements to standardizing your file name for all of your work. Um, Artist name, artwork title, the year, the medium, an abbreviation of the medium, dimensions, and the type of image it is. So original, is it for the web? Is it for print? Is it detailed? So let's talk about the basic structure of a file name. And this is bringing in the elements of those basic structure, the basic elements I just had on the previous slide, right? So I'm going to talk about this as like a single artwork and then a series of artwork. So here on the screen, we've got structure. And then below that is the real example. Okay. So for last name, title, year, medium, dimensions, and then that type of image or type of file. Your real example would be if your last name is Smith, your work's title. So I know this is a painting because I made this file name up. Horizon is the title. It was made in 2003. The medium is oil. Here are the dimensions of 24 by 36, and I put IN for inches. If you did centimeters, it's cm. And then this is my original, and it's a TIFF. What if I'm working in a series, right? So I should have used an architecture example for this. Like if I took pictures of buildings, that's another way to think about this, right? Different perspectives. It's the same piece, same object, just different views. A series of photographs, or you could also think of this as like a series of paintings in one collection of type of paintings. It follows a similar format, except where we're adding this series name into the mix and giving it a number too. So landscape in series number 3, item number 3 in the series. There's also handling special cases. So these are just some other examples if you're doing collaborative work. If you're doing multimedia work, you have additions, if you have detailed shots, if your work is mainly installation based. Again, these are all just recommendations and just examples of how you could be building your file names. So what to avoid? Because we are working with computers. So what do computers not like? Computers don't like these things. Computers don't like spaces. Computers like underscores. And think of this as like computers have their own language, right? We got to learn the syntax. It's just like learning any language. It's like how to write it out for the computer to be able to understand it. So they don't like spaces. They like underscores. They don't like special characters. This is all in file names. They don't like special characters like pounds or ampersands or at symbols or percentages. They don't like super, super duper long file names. So trying to keep it under 50 characters or 50 ones and zeros. 50s letters and numbers. They also don't like ambiguous dates. Give it a date, a year at the minimum, right? There can also be like version confusion with it. So, if you have different versions of photographs, use like V1, V2, or specific dates for versions of photographs of the same work. Final in file names, nothing is ever final. And then uppercases, right? So only use lowercase. And here's a helpful checklist. Design your file naming standard or the convention before you start. Document your system with some examples. So what I do is I have like a digital notebook where I annotate these decisions so I can make sense of my file naming. So I'm actually like documenting my rationale for a file name. Now I know some of you might be like, this is like overdone. Like, what? Trust me, you will thank yourself in the future because you may, like 2 years from now, you may be like, what was that file naming standard? I need to make sense of what this file name means. Um, so creating a system and documenting it for yourself. It's also creating a template for you having to like do renaming in a batch or in a group way. There are softwares like Photoshop or Lightroom where you can rename a bunch of photos in one fell swoop automatically instead of having to do one by one by one. Okay. So let's now talk about arranging folders for file organization. So why do folders matter? Okay, so I want everyone to like visualize their computer literally as like a physical filing system. Um, where there's all these like drawers and cabinets, right? Our job is going to be to create those cabinets and folders within those cabinets. So, folder organization does matter. Um, why? It allows you for quick file retrieval. It gives you a logical process of the like how your work is arranged and potentially how it's progressed over a period of time. It allows you to do easier file backup too. Having things centrally located, it's like one backup, well, one place to back up instead of having to go search for multiple places. Um, it helps give you a professional workflow for image retrieval, and it also heavily helps protect against losing files. Um, so creating a hierarchy that makes sense to you. When we're talking about arranging our folders on our computer system, on our laptops, on our desktops, or if you're storing on the cloud, same concepts. If you're doing Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, it's same concepts, not just for your laptop, folders, and developing a hierarchy. So I'm going to show you 3 examples of a hierarchical structure that makes sense to me as an artist. That's on the next slide. But this hierarchy concept, again, it supports, you can see this image on the left. Here's the hierarchy, right? So it's all about efficient retrieval, logical organization, helping with efficient backups, and also scaling your body of work. So ways to think about arranging your folders. You can do it by year. So in this example, so artwork would be like the top level. Like I also like to think about this as like parent-child relationships, where the artwork is the top level, and that's the parent. And then within the artwork folder, you have these subfolders or like the children of the parent. And so we've got artwork as the top level. Then we have 2003 and 2004 as the first sublevel. And then within each of those years, we've got painting series 1. Painting series has 2 folders inside of it too, originals and web. And so we've got painting series, sculpture series, new series, but you can see that there's folders within folders within folders, and everything is arranged by year. Next is we have medium. So this is if you're doing painting and sculpture, it's same concept. It's nesting. It's this arrangement that makes sense to you. So you can do it by medium. And then finally, you could also do it by series. And I share like arrange it how it makes most sense to you. These are just three versions of arrangement that you could potentially use for yourself. Okay. Continuing with like effective file names and organizing, here's a helpful checklist. Be consistent across all your projects, all your folders. Document your system. Use clear descriptive folder names. It needs to make sense to you and potentially people who are going to access these folders in the future. Try to limit your nesting of folders to like 3 to 4 levels max. After that, like stuff can get kind of wild and hard to find. And having this kind of like having a hierarchical folder structure allows you to, again, have an easier and regular way for your system to be able to streamline backing up your files. So consider this like all of this front loading of work for organizing yourself as future proofing. All right, we're gonna stop the share and let's ask questions. Who's got questions? Put them in the chat or feel free to raise your hand. All right, let me do a temperature read of the class. Um, give me a thumbs up if all of this makes no sense whatsoever. If you're confused, if you are confused, give me a thumbs up. Okay. If you are not confused and this makes total sense to you, give me a thumbs up. Okay, awesome. Beautiful. My next question for all of you, we're gonna wait for all the thumbs to go down. My next question to all of you is, would you like a break? A 5-minute break. Give me a thumbs up if you want to have a 5-minute break. Okay, we're gonna do a 5-minute break. My deal is like if ever there's like more than 2 people that want a break, we're gonna pause. So if y'all could come back in 5 minutes, I've got on my clock, it's 7:06. So come back at 7:11, and see you in a minute. Okay, and we're back. It is 7:11, so we're gonna get going. All right, let me do my screen share, and we're gonna continue. Okay, let's get to the part about building your own catalog, or what I like to call artwork descriptions. Because it's great to have an image. What about the annotations or explanation about what that image deal is, or what is it about? So, what are the essential elements of artwork descriptions? First, think about what a museum needs for each of your works. That's what my automatic go-to. It's like, what would a museum want to know about my stuff? You might be saying to yourself, well, that's like me thinking very highly of myself. Like, no, it's not. Trust me. Like the museum professionals and archivists, like we would love for you to learn how to like use our standards. Period. So think about you being a museum curator, someone working at a museum that's responsible for managing a museum collection. So, the example I have here is from the Guggenheim in New York. So this is The Flip Side by Lorna Simpson. So if we were to go to this website, this is, and do I have it linked? I do have it linked. Yes. Beautiful. All right. I'm gonna stop my share for a second and I'm gonna share my desktop. Okay. So here is the Guggenheim's website, and this is where you can access some of their online digital collections to see what they have in-house. But check it out here. And Tony, are you able to see my screen, the Guggenheim website?
Yes, looks good.
All right, sweet, perfect. So here on the right-hand side, so I said, think like a museum. Artist name, title, date, medium, dimensions, credit. Some of these are like actually museum related that are important to them, like a session number. Like you don't need to know that one. Copyright, artwork type. So let me just get my PowerPoint back up. And can you see my slides, Tony?
Yes.
Perfect. So thinking like a museum. Second, what do you need? What do you need in addition to what the museum needs? Because the museum needs are also your needs, right? Like what's the title of your piece? What's the copyright on your piece? What do you need? So here's an example of a page that I have on my pottery website for my business. And I think that way. Like, in addition to what the museum needs, what do I need to sell my work? So I create a unique ID, a unique identifier for all of the work that I put on my website. And I use I use a service called Square. But this process can be used for any kind of e-commerce platform if you're selling your work online, including Etsy. So a unique ID, a description, a brief description or a long one, however you deem appropriate for your work, an artwork description, and it should really focus on what the work is about, pricing, an inventory number, places you've sold, or other relevant information, right? So again, these like this second consideration for when you are cataloging your work and documenting item by item in your collection, it's what do you need most? So I want all of you to either on your phones, on a piece of paper, in your minds, I want you to choose one of your works and describe it. Okay. So I'm gonna leave this up. We'll do this for like 10 minutes, and I want you to like think about a piece that you have or pull out a piece that's next to you and definitely fill out what the museum requires, which is on the left-hand side. And then here's like the additional stuff that like I know I need. So take some time to do that. And I'm not going to give you 10 minutes just because we're low on time. I'll give you about 5 minutes to do that. And just think about one item and catalog it using the museum standards on the left. So it's 7:15 now, and I'll give y'all until 7:20.
have a question.
Of course, yes.
So if I'm doing artwork title underscore date underscore medium underscore, if the title has more than one word or the artwork type has more than one word, am I putting artwork underscore type underscore? Like, do things start to mush together where the medium kind of sounds like the artwork type or the like? Does that make
So
sense?
I think you're conflating file naming with just like just doing
Oh,
some descriptions. So
right.
yeah, like when
Thank you.
like an artwork title,
Yeah, thank you.
um, let me show you an example of mine. I'll put this on. This is so here's an example of one of mine, right? It's just plain text, describe it. So my artwork title for this piece is Long White Speckled Platter. So y'all got 3 more minutes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have another question. Do you have a recommendation for like how to construct an inventory number?
Oh yeah. So the way I do mine is so my business name is Friendship Station Pottery. So I do FSP. So let me pull mine. I do FSP dash, and then I have 4 places for digits because I could make over 100 works someday, right? So I Friendship Station FSP dash 0001 for how I make my ID system. Another way to think about ID is you could also just use your file name.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a great question. Okay, you got 1 more minute.
Kate, can I ask you a question in our minute here?
100%.
So I was writing my description for my art piece and I was wondering, is it better? Because I'm more focused on like portfolio description type stuff. Is it better to do a description that's like visually, this is what I see, like I see a deer in the forest? Or is it better to do like, oh, I made this piece because blah, blah, blah?
Yeah, so you're talking about the difference between an artist statement and a description of the work. So you could have, so this is the practice that I use as an artist and an archivist. I want to have an artwork description that explains the aboutness of the work. And then I'm going to maybe have a like artist statement as another label or another field to use. And that's where I will add my interpretation or my statement about the work. So that's the approach that I like to use. But I'm thinking about this as like, if I'm going to go put this on the internet to sell, that's my framing. Or if I'm going to go donate this to a museum someday, um, the actual just like what the work shows you versus what the artist tells you about the work. I like to separate those two things, but that's just my practice.
Okay, that is a good distinction. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, y'all, time is up. So it's okay if you didn't finish. I'm gonna pull up my example here just so you can see like what I've put together for one of my pieces that comes from my catalog. And this piece is also on my website. So a lot of this information, this description, it's publicly available there too. Um, so I want to hear from y'all, like from one or two people. What was that experience like for you? What was a success? What was successful and what was challenging about it? And raise your hand if you want to share. And if no one wants to share, we'll just move on. And I see I've got an alert in the chat. Let me see what that says. Places sold. What does that mean? Yeah, so I sell my work to restaurants. I have my work for sale at Mod Kearns. I have it for sale on my website. So I like to keep track of where people can purchase my artwork. So that's what I mean by places sold. It also gives me like a record of where my work has been available for purchase too. So before we move on to the next topic, biggest headaches I hear about cataloging work is how much time it takes. Yep, takes a lot of time. But it helps you in the future. Trust me, helps you in the future. So when you were cataloging your work, creating a description, creating these descriptions, what you are doing is you're building a catalog or just a tracking system for yourself. So spreadsheets are your friend. Spreadsheets are good. Spreadsheets can be intimidating, but spreadsheets are like the gold standard for if you are going to create a list of your artwork, not even just a list, but like a comprehensive catalog of your work. Spreadsheets are gold. There's if you don't know how to use spreadsheets, there are so many tutorials online. LinkedIn Learning is a place I always point people to. But spreadsheets are great because they give you a structured way to organize your catalog. It gives you the ability to sort your descriptions or your data. Quick information retrieval. So if you in your inventory, your catalog, you put the file name somewhere in that, like as a column, in your catalog, you can literally copy and paste that file name and search it on your computer, and bam, it will bring up that file for you immediately. So it's great for quick information retrieval if you put file name in your catalog, whatever meets your needs for being able to find your stuff. Inventory tracking, again, it's documentation history. I'd say that like, yeah, there is a learning curve, but the barrier for entry and how to like do data entry in a spreadsheet is pretty low. And you don't need any like wildly specialized softwares. Like you could use Excel, you could use Google Sheets or Numbers if you're using Mac. All right, let's pause. Questions before we move on to copyright. Feel free to use the chat, unmute yourself and ask a question. Okay. Copyright. Now, I previously mentioned we had another workshop that went into the nitty-gritties of copyright. I am only going to be talking about your copyright. That's it. And what your rights are with copyright. I'm not going to be talking about the in-depth of using other people's work and what's fair use and what's public domain. I'm not going to dive hardcore into that. We have an online resource and a recorded workshop that you are more than welcome to visit or revisit. So what's copyright? Copyright is a form of intellectual property protection that is granted by US, like United States law. It is automatic and it is for an original work that's been authored or created. So it has to be, your work has to be on a fixed medium. Your idea put into a painting on a canvas. That painting is the original work. That is the copywritten work. Your copyright, again, it's automatic. You are the owner. You are the copyright holder of that artwork that you made. So, and again, this is protected by US copyright law, and it's governed by the Copyright Act of 1976. Two things to always remember about copyright. What is an original work, and what is what rights are protected by copyright? So what legal rights do you have that are protected by copyright? So I had mentioned like original works. What is that? Original work has to be independently created by somebody, by an author, an artist, a creator. Has to be made by somebody and be original, not created from another work. So I'm not talking about making derivatives. Like if I were to go and like be like, all right, cool, I found a picture in a book and I'm gonna go Xerox copy it or scan it and then say it's mine. Nope, that's not how it works. It also needs to possess at least a minimum degree of creativity. So these artistic choices such as composition, color, perspective, arrangement, these can satisfy the specifications of what is required for an original work. Okay, so some examples that I have here, like plays, music, paintings, sculptures, installations, any kind of visual form, any type of creative work. So what is protected by copyright? So again, the copyright protects this tangible expression of the creative work, not the underlying concepts, techniques that you used, or the ideas that your work expresses. For an artist, again, this means the protected copyright protects your finished painting, illustrations, sculptures, photographs, digital work, or other visual original pieces. What's not protected, again, themes, concepts, styles, techniques that you have used. Is copyright automatic? Yep, it is automatic. The moment you make that original work and it is in a fixed, tangible medium, like a digital file, paper, canvas, your copyright is protected and you are the owner. And people ask me all the time, well, am I required to register? No, but you can. It's not required. So when you do register your work with the US Copyright Office, it's not like you can do it. But when you do it, and when you do it, not but, and when you do it, it gives you a stronger ability to protect your work if ever you were going to court because someone is infringing on your copyright, or if someone's accusing you of copyright infringement. So I have a list here of like, what are some elements that when you apply for a copyright with the US Copyright Office, what can that do to support you? Ultimately what it does is it gives you stronger legal standing if ever you have to hire a lawyer and go to court. Let's talk about how long copyright lasts. This can be kind of confusing, and I'll explain why. Duration of copyright. So any work that has been made post January 1st, 1978. Here's the duration, the amount of time that copyright lasts. For an individual creator, their work is the life of the artist plus 70 years. After that, it can become out of copyright. Works made for hire. This is when you are contracted by a business to work for them. Like if you were an in-house graphic designer or if you're a photographer and you were hired to take some pictures for a magazine, but you weren't a regular employee, that's what's considered a work for hire. So those works, it's 95 days from the publication or 120 years from the point of creation. It's whichever one expires first. And most of the time with work for hire, it's the business that contracted you that owns your work, so that really can apply to them exclusively. And then there's also when you're doing collaborations and there's joint ownership of artwork that you make. For those collaborative works, it's jointly owned by everybody. It's 70 years after the death of the last surviving creator. So what about work before 1978? This is where it can get like kind of funky because it like depends on when something was created and published. So the duration rules can be more complex and depends on like when it was published, like, and some other factors too, like your copyright notice, if you register when you registered it with the Copyright Office. And if you're like, Kate, why does it depend? Y'all, you can blame Disney and Sonny Bono for this. Disney specifically, back in the day, many, many moons ago, in the 70s, 60s, 70s, they knew what they had. And that company didn't want to see its animations and movies go out of copyright because they wanted to continue to monetize it. So there's a lot of lobbying that went down with the United States government, and that's when copyright law changed. So as of 2025, like anything that has been published before 1930, it's copyright free. It's now considered in the public domain. So every year on January 1st, 1930 is going to turn into 1931 next January 2026. So public domain exists. It means stuff is no longer in copyright. All right, I'm going to pause. Any questions related to this before we move on to the last part of our workshop?
I put this in the chat, but you say fixed and tangible. So is a digital file, like a digital photo, copyrighted, or is it only the print?
Nope, it's digital too. Yep.
I have a question,
Go ahead, Sue.
if it's okay. If I sell something to somebody, actually I have two questions. The first one is, if I sell something to somebody, do I still have the copyright?
Well, they're the owner now, right?
Right?
So
So,
it's theirs. And so this is the advice that
Okay.
I always give artists. Gotta have an agreement.
okay, that was my next question, because I've done some collaborative works with a musician and I've illustrated his poetry and music. And we don't have an agreement. But we maybe should have had one.
Yep. Always have an
Okay.
agreement. Totally.
Okay.
And try to get it in writing as well. Because verbal agreements are legit, but I also want to pause for a second. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just an advocate. I say that for like my own self-preservation. But I always advocate put it in writing. Adriana, go ahead.
Okay, so
This is actually Lily right now. but
yes.
yeah.
Hi, we're sharing a computer.
Cool.
So I was wondering if your copyright is still viable even if like it's like someone overseas like steals your artwork. And then or like someone like from a different country, is this like only applicable to the US? And then the other part of that question is it anything before 1930s in America, or is that like applicable to like artwork or things all across the globe?
Yeah, I love getting this question about like the globe, international copyright. So I'm only framing this within the US context. International law is very different, and I'm not ultra familiar with international law. So the like public domain, how it sits in like the UK or how it sits in China or how it sits somewhere else, I can't speak to that unless I look it up because laws change. But in the US, yeah, 1930 and before is copyright free. And then you also asked about like, does your copyright stand? If someone steals it from the internet. Yeah, your ownership definitely stands. They weren't allowed to do that. But also I want to ask this question. How many of us have gone on Google Image and just like downloaded pictures from it without asking permission of that person? So there comes like a level of morality and ethics in terms of like how we as a culture, as Americans, like just kind of go on the internet and take as we please. Um, I'm not going to go into the details about licensing artwork. That's in the copyright workshop. But with copyright, there's this bundle of rights that you as an owner have. Some of those rights include the right to reproduce, the right to distribute, the right to display, um, et cetera, et cetera. And Alan, you have your hand raised. Alan, I'm gonna assume that your question in the chat is the one that you wanted to ask. So what should one give, say, receipt, the elements to a buyer? I don't know what you mean by that question. If you could rephrase and put that in the chat, I think that would help me out. Um, and Sue, I answered your question, and then with Roger, well, Adriana, how relevant is it with protecting your artwork from AI? Yeah, I mean, so AI is a new frontier. AI is a black box, so if you're wondering how it works, none of us know. We can guess how these algorithms operate. But yeah, it's a black box, and guess what? If you put your stuff on the internet, just expect the bots to get to it. That's just it. And so that's why don't put high quality online. Always do lower quality on the internet. Always do low quality or derivatives of your artwork online. That's one way to mediate AI and also like people taking your work and reusing it for other purposes. An example I like to give is, oh, I found this really cool image online and I want to make a poster of it. And it's like, drat, it's only 2 inches by 2 inches and I want to print it as a 16 by 20. And it's like, guess what, y'all? You can't, because when you blow it up, it's going to be really fuzzy and poor quality, right? Okay, Alan, I see your question in here. Receipt for buyer, what details should be provided to the buyer's long-term investment? I mean, they're going to own that object, but you could also like in your receipts that maybe you email to them or you print out to them is just say like, I own the image rights to this. You own the object. So this is where you're gonna have to understand what your bundle of rights are. And essentially what you're gonna be doing, Alan, is creating a license for your work. Again, I also want to say I'm not a lawyer. I'm just making recommendations and how to navigate this landscape. Roger, you have another question. What if I do a painting based on photography of another person, do I need to ask permission? It depends. It depends on the license. But it depends on the license and it also depends on how transformative your painting is. Highly encourage you to watch the workshop about copyright because it goes into more depth about using other people's work. This workshop, we're just focusing on ourselves and not other people's copyright. Any other questions before we continue? Okay, cool. All right. Digital storage and backups. This is the last part of our workshop before we have our wrap up. The main thing I tell folks about digital backups and storage is this is all about preventing loss. So in archives land, we have a philosophy that is also applied in IT land, information technology, computer science land. It's called locks. Lots of copies keep stuff safe. This is a philosophy, a way of being. Locks. What is locks and where did it come from? So locks was actually originally developed, this philosophy was developed by the Stanford University Library. So folks like me, the archivists, the digital archivists, came up with this concept. The core philosophy of locks is this redundancy prevents data loss. Multiple copies in different locations ensures survival, ensures that you're going to have access to it in the future. right? It applies both. This also applies both to physical and digital, right? So if you're making versions in the physical, having it be at your house and then having it be at somebody else's house or storage facility, so another place. And then also, this is an essential practice to any artist's like legacy period. So why artists need locks? Your digital files are going to always be vulnerable without locks because of these things. Hardware fails. Maybe you ever had a computer die on you and then you lose all the data that's on your computer. Hardware fails. Technology breaks. Data can break with it. Stuff that's on your computer can just vanish, right? Software can corrupt your files. So I've had that happen where it's like, why isn't this JPEG opening anymore? And I can't figure out why it's not opening anymore. And it has to do with sometimes it has to do with a bug or your software corrupting it in some way. It also loss can happen because of human error. So I have accidentally deleted original files in the past and haven't been able to get them back. And it's been really sad. And the example I'm using is not my artwork, but it's with family photographs. That's the biggest one. I always like I'm like, Kate, you no longer have pictures of your aunt. I didn't print them. There's also natural disasters to be aware of too, right? So, wildfires more frequently happening in Oregon. If you only have your files on your laptop or a hard drive at your house, but you didn't back up your stuff on the cloud, you might lose your assets. You might lose your files. There's also theft and then technology obsolescence. So I actually have some really old hard drives, and like some of us on the call might know what I'm talking about. Floppy disks. My brother actually gave me a floppy disk from like 1998 because I was really into photography when digital photo was like coming up, and my uncle was wicked into, I'm from Massachusetts, by the way, I just caught myself with the wicked. My uncle was really, really into just like the latest technology, and I remember in 98 he let me use his digital camera, and the storage medium for it was a floppy disk, and it was like only 16 megabytes, which was a lot at the time. This is in the late 90s. So technology obsolescence. How do I open up that floppy disk? That floppy drive, I should say, that floppy drive. Floppy disk. How can I open that floppy disk? Well, because I'm an archivist, I have the hardware to open it up, but it's not readily available. So how do I open up my like photos that I took when I was like 12? Okay, so continuing with prevention loss and why do artists need it? Lost documentation, lost opportunities for yourself and for your legacy. So with locks, let's talk about this 3-2-1 backup rule. How do you put the philosophy into practice is what I'm getting at now. Is try to have 3 copies of your data. Again, this is the aspiration. This is the best practice. If you're only able to create 2 copies, better than 1, right? Better than 1. Try to create 3 copies of your data and store it in 2 different locations, 2 different media types. So when I say a media type, I'm talking about 2 different types of media. When I'm talking about media, I'm talking about hard drives and servers, storage devices. So my laptop is one. I also use Dropbox, cloud storage. And then I have a hard drive separate from my computer that I keep stuff on. My storage that's on the cloud, the copies that I keep on the cloud, that's my outside of my house copy, different geographic location. And then the other is offsite storage. The example of the cloud storage is what I have for offsite, off physical location, not at my house. So remember when we were talking about cataloging and file names? Wouldn't it be great if all your file names were very similar, like you had a standard, and when you have all these different storage locations, you could search for a file name in both places and it's like, boom, there they are. Anyway, let me continue because we are 10 minutes before the workshop ends. So here are some best practices for digital storage, file formats. We talked about industry standards like TIFF and JPEG, the organizing your file, your hierarchy. So all of this front end work is helping you with your storage backup later, right? Keep going. So here are your storage media options. This is like your hard drive. So we call it local storage, would be the hard drive on your computer, on your laptop or your desktop. There's also solid state drives. These are literally hard drives. USB flash drives, those are still legit. And then there's like network attached storage. This would be if you had a network. A lot of the times photographers will have like photo agencies or like design agencies or universities will have these in place where it's network storage, where you can hook up to someone's computer network and be able to access all the data that is on that network from multiple laptops or multiple devices. Cloud storage. Cloud's not free. They give you a little bit of free. I pay for Dropbox. I forget how much I pay. I think I pay like 120 bucks annually. But here's some options for cloud storage. We got Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive, iCloud. Backblaze is another one. So with this backing up your data, there are technical instructions that you can follow with like how to back up your data. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritties of those, but there are automated ways for you to hook into these various storage mediums and set timers for how frequently backups occur. So key features to look for when you're thinking about an automated solution is the ability to schedule automated backups, the ability to like have incremental backups, the ability to have multiple versions of backups, an easy recovery process, and also encryption options. For folks that are wondering, it's like, what's encryption? Encryption essentially means like, it's like you have encoded your digital files to really be able to open up by you. It's like an encryption is a way so hackers can't get in and corrupt your files. All right, so here's what actually like a backup system can look like, because it's like visualizing this like in practice. Like what? So here is my laptop. I use a Mac, personal Mac laptop. And remember this like three copies? Here's a copy. Here's a copy. Here's a copy. What are these three devices? Or I should say, what are these three backup options? What are these like storage options? So with my personal MacBook Pro, on a Mac computer, there's an app called Time Machine. Time Machine is an app. Again, it's a computer program that is specifically for backing up your computer or folders on your computer. It will back up your entire hard drive if you configure it that way. And it gets connected to a portable hard drive or an SSD, solid state drive, a hard drive. So that's one way to back it up. So that's one copy, goes on a hard drive that you can actually hold in your hands. The next is, let's do the next one. So Time Machine, again, this is an app on a Mac computer. It goes to this device right here, the Pi 4 NAS. This is a network drive. So if I were like at my work, I have a network drive where I back up stuff and I can have other computers be able to access this backup. So it's just another backup system. It's actually a NAS is something that's specifically designed for backups. And then finally, we have Backblaze app. This is cloud. This is a cloud app. So on my Mac, I've got downloaded, mine actually is a Dropbox is the app I have on the syncing between my laptop and Dropbox is how I have mine set up. But Backblaze is an app and it works similarly to Time Machine, but it goes to the cloud instead of a hard drive or a solid state drive. So this is again just like a visual example of what like the data backup conceptually can look like in practice. All right, I'm gonna stop there. Questions? And it's gonna be questions about anything now. I got 5 more minutes for questions before I send y'all a survey to fill out and share a website with you. I'm also gonna stay after the workshop if folks want to stay behind and ask me some more specific questions. So yeah, enter your questions in the chat, unmute yourself, feel free to ask. Okay, I'm hearing silence, which is cool with me. Silence is golden. So I am going to share now with all of you in the chat. I'm going to copy and I'm going to paste a website address that I would like you to open. So if you could please go to that website that I just shared with you. And this is a workshop evaluation. This is information for me and also for Maud Kearns to learn more about your experience in this workshop. So if you could fill that out, take a couple minutes to do that. And then once folks are done filling that out, I'm going to share the online resource that I've developed for y'all.
Is it okay to ask a question?
100, yes, for sure.
What happens if you subscribe to, say, Google Drive or Dropbox, and you stop subscribing? What happens to your data?
You lose
Do they
access.
simply erase it,
No, you just
or
lose access to it until you pay.
but they keep it for a while?
Yeah, so you would have to go look at their terms of service of how long they retain data for accounts that no longer have subscriptions. And
All
usually what
right.
they'll do is they'll send you an email ahead of time. I haven't the only time I've encountered this with any kind of cloud storage, there used to be this well, it still exists. When I was so in the early 2000s, a cloud storage company that I use was called Photo Bucket. And I just got an email from them being like, hey, by the way, you have some data on Photo Bucket and we're going to be deleting it. That was my free account. And you know how old that Photo Bucket account was? It's like 20 years old. I like made it when I was like 19. So you'd want to check with that vendor, with that company. But here's the beauty of this like whole backup system. Your data should not only be on the cloud. Your data should also be backed up somewhere else. So if you did stop paying Google or stop paying Dropbox or stop paying Microsoft, you have a copy of your data.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
So I have a question. I was signed up for the copyright class and I got confused and didn't take it. How do I find it?
Tony's gonna send out an email to everybody.
Okay.
And also, in the chat, I just linked to the website I made for both of these workshops, copyright and art documentation. So
Okay.
learn about copyright if you didn't want. So the link to the copyright workshop is not on there yet. I'm gonna add it. It's not gonna live there in perpetuity though, because It's streaming from the cloud, from Zoom's cloud, and so there's only like a limited duration of time where I can make it publicly available before it needs to be deleted from my storage. And if I were to download the file, it's gigabytes.
Mhm.
Gigabyte. Any other questions? Okay. Well, with that, I'm going to stop our recording. Thank you everybody for coming.